September was such a great reading month. I finally got all of that variety that I'm always craving. I finally got to read some fantasy, some romance, a little bit of nonfiction, as well as a middle grade. So I managed to read 9 books this month, and it was like something for every mood, for every different day, because the start of fall always brings hot days, cold days, a little bit of everything. So I was all over the place with my moods. So that's why my reading tastes were a little bit varied this month. And some of these books were incredible, and you must pick them up ASAP. So I can't wait to tell you about those. The first book I read this month is called Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This book is, of course, everywhere. You will have seen it by now. It's kind of in competition for becoming the best fantasy romance of the year, so I had to check it out. And the story is about Iris and Roman, and they are 2 rival journalists who end up communicating through these like magical typewriters. And in this world, there's also a big war going on between the 2 gods that are kind of rivals as well. And so the story is quite layered and has a lot of different elements to it. It's also very fast-paced. It's an easy read. It's not hard to digest, even though the writing is a little bit lyrical and poetic, which I did enjoy, and that made it quite interesting and unique to other stories that I've read. I think the aspects that I did not enjoy were the fact that they described what was going on with the gods and the war pretty early on, but then it kind of dropped off for the rest of the story and you didn't get more insight into those fantastical elements. And so I thought that was a little bit unfinished, but I did enjoy the story of the 2 characters and how they kind of come together. The enemy part was really good as well. I think sometimes enemies to lovers can be done kind of rushed, whereas in this one, it did make sense as to why they were kind of enemies and then became more. So there were so many good parts of this book, but also some parts that I question, which is why I gave it 4 stars. I think it's definitely worth a read. I will be reading the sequel, but I'm not going to be like running to read it as soon as it comes out. I will get to it eventually. So 4 stars, definitely worth checking out. The next book I picked up was called Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller. This story is about Elosa, and she is, as you guessed it, the daughter of the Pirate King. And this story is about her trying to find some missing pieces to a map that leads to some treasure. It is your very average pirate tale. There's nothing that different from any other pirate story that you've read, which is why I found it to be very average. I also think the maturity level was not there for me, so it's a very YA book, and if I'm being completely honest, it might even be middle grade. It might even be younger than that. I mean, I've read middle grade books that are a little bit more mature than this book, so I definitely think this is not the season of my life that I'm enjoying these kinds of books anymore. But if you or a middle grader in your life are looking for like a pirate adventure set at sea on a ship and all of those nautical themes, then this book will hit the spot for you. There is also a sequel called Daughter of the Siren Queen, which in my opinion is such a terrible title because it kind of gives away part of the story and some of the mystery. But there is a sequel. I don't think I will be running to read that. I'm not saying I won't ever, but I will have to be particularly bored on some random day. It's not like I'm jumping over backwards to read it right now. So I found this very average, 2.5 stars. The next book I read was a nonfiction. It's called Conversations on Love by Natasha Lunn, and I think every single person should read this book. It was so incredible, had so much great insight. If there's one book you get from this video, then please let it be this one. You must read it. It has some great in-depth insight into love in all of its forms. So it's parental love, it's love in friendship, it's love in romantic relationships, just so insightful in all of those various forms. And I found it to pack quite a punch. I mean, clearly you can tell with the number of tabs I have here. I found it to be so relatable. It wasn't fluffy like most nonfiction can be. It was like actual, practical, real life, what happens in all of these various relationships in our life. And it reads really quickly as well, even though it does pack a punch because it's in conversation format. So the author is interviewing different experts and different people who deal in love and relationships. And so you're getting insight from a lot of different people and a lot of different perspectives. I think this book is just incredible. I obviously gave it 5 stars, and I think every single person should read it. The next book I picked up was also a nonfiction, and that is called The Little Book of Huga by Mike Viking. And this book is all about the Danish principle of Huga, which is to do with all things coziness. This book talks about all the different ways that you can fill your life and your home with warmth and joy and all the feelings that come with being content. This is why the Danish people are always ranked as some of the happiest in the world, is because they practice a lot of these principles and add these elements into their daily life. This book has so many great illustrations and practical ways that you can bring that coziness into your home. And these are all of the things that spark joy in me, and they speak to my heart. So I really enjoy this book. So if you are looking for ways to add coziness into your life and your home as well, then please check this book out. The next book I picked up was a middle grade book. It's called The VanderBeepers on the Road by Karina Jan Glasser. This is the 6th installment of the VanderBeepers series. This series is about a family that consists of a mom, a dad, 5 VanderBeeper children, and a ton of pets. So you can imagine their family always has a little bit of chaos going on. I love this series with my whole heart. It is so wholesome and so full of joy. I have enjoyed every single one, and this one was no different. In this one, they hit the open road and they're going on a cross-country trip. Can you imagine all of those people and animals in one van trying to take a trip across the country? It's exactly as you would imagine it. It's chaos, it's wholesome, it's cuddling, it's fighting, it's everything that you could want in a family trip. And I find all of the books to keep in tone with exactly what Karina has set out to do, which is create that feeling of a really relatable family with relatable children and sibling bonds and family bonds and the ups and downs that they go through. And I just have found so much joy in this series. If you enjoy middle grade and you're looking for a wholesome middle grade series, I definitely would recommend this. It is one of my favorites of all time. The next book I read was a romance. I was finally ready to pick up some romances, and that book is called The Right Move by Liz Tomford. You guys, this book was fire. So the first one in the series is called Mile High, and I read that a couple of months ago. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was incredible. So going into this one, I was a little skeptical because I'm like, how can you repeat that amount of amazing? And it sure did, and actually I think this book did it even better. I enjoyed this one more than Mile High, if that's even possible. This one was so good. This is about Ryan and Indy. Ryan is the brother of the female lead in the first book, and Indy is the best friend of the female lead in the first book. So they're all kind of interconnected, and I would highly recommend you read the first one before you get to this one. Even though they're standalone, it's just kind of nice to have that background on the characters when they reappear, but this story is so good. And with romances, usually like 300 to 350 pages is enough to get, you know, enough about the story and the characters and them to fall in love, have the third act break up and all the things. But these are like 400 or 500 pages, and I'm always like, you know, do you need all those pages? Like, surely not. But then you start reading and you're like, yup, every single word, every sentence, every page belongs in this story. It is not extra. There's not fluff. It's like the story is just so well told. Liz Tomford does a great job of showing a lot of representation, a lot of mental health stuff, having really relatable characters with great personalities. She also writes chemistry amazing. Like, sometimes chemistry in books between characters, if I don't feel it, then I don't get into the book. But with these characters, oh my gosh, she's so good at writing that chemistry. And it felt like people that you knew in real life, and you could almost see yourself being in their place, falling in love with each other. So needless to say, I gave it 5 stars. I think it is incredible, and you have to pick it up if you are a romance fan and you're looking for a really sweet but deep and meaningful story. And then the last 3 books that I read are all part of a series, a dark romance series called the Never After series. So we have Hooked, we have Scarred, and then we have Wretched. And there are more in the series, but I only got to these 3 this month. And Emily McIntyre, the author of these stories, calls them fractured fairy tales. So they're not retellings. They're not the traditional stories that you know, just told in a different way. These are actually a different spin and a different take on it. So for instance, in Hooked, this is kind of a loosely based on Peter Pan type story, and in this one you have Hook and Wendy getting together. And in Scar, this one's loosely based on The Lion King, so this one talks about the scarred prince, which is Tristan, and his love interest is Sarah. And then in the last one, this one is loosely kind of based or surrounding themes from The Wizard of Oz, and in this book you have Evelina and Nick. So like I said, these books are fractured fairy tales. They are not quite the stories that you are used to. It's just elements of those stories that come up in these books. So for instance, in Hook, they have a bar called the Jolly Roger. And so you see those little hints of the story appearing. And like in Scarred, I love that the family, their last name was called the Fossa family, which is kind of like a play on Mufasa. So it's really fun to see how they drop little hints of all of those stories into these books. So you get get little like kind of adjacent feelings of those fairy tales. But I found these to be very good. I wanted to pick up dark romance. I'm not really a dark romance kind of girly. I usually kind of stick to your more traditional rom-coms and some of those kind of more emotional stories. And so I was like, let me give dark romance a try. And these are, I would say, on the lighter side of the dark romance scale, because you can get some really deep and dark stuff. And I was not ready to jump in that far. I was like, I kind of want to start on this side of the scale. And they were just enough to give you those dark feelings. I mean, there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of extreme spice in these. I mean, they really push the boundaries. And I think that was enough for me. Like, I think I will dabble in dark romance here and there, but it probably still is not my favorite. I might still need to tiptoe a little bit. I gave these books some average ratings. So Hooked, I gave 3 stars. Scarred, I gave 4 stars. This one was actually really, really good. And I think the story in this one was fleshed out the best. And then Wretched, I actually DNF'd because I could not get into the story. This one was all around the world of like drugs and drug dealing, and because it's loosely based on The Wizard of Oz and the Bad Witch, I just found her character to be a little bit extreme and I couldn't really read about her, so I did DNF this one. I think the next one is called Twisted. I will read that one because that one is loosely based on Aladdin, and Aladdin is my favorite Disney story, so I think I will read that. If you are looking to dip your toe into dark romance and read something that might read a little bit more familiar to ease your way into dark romance, then I would recommend these. I think they're worth checking out. I just think some of them are better than others, so you kind of have to find your way through them. So those are the 9 books I read this month. I was really pleased with my reading month. I loved having all of that variety, and I think I'm going to continue that on in October because it really helps with some of these moods that I have and the weather changing all the time. It really kind of helps play into that. So I think in October, I'm really excited about the witchy reads, some spooky reads, but then I will, of course, always pepper in some of my romances that I love and some middle grades as well. So I am really excited about October. Thank you for watching today's video. If you've read any of these or have any other recommendations for me, please leave them down below. I always love hearing other recommendations and talking to you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.